Chapter 1: Arrival. The island doesn't welcome visitors. It watches them. The rotor blades chop the air like machetes slicing jungle vines. Through the chopper's scratched window, Isla Sorna rose from the mist, a jagged emerald crown in the middle of the Pacific. David squinted into the sunrise. Beneath the clouds, a dense green canopy stretched to the coast. Farther inland, sharp cliffs and old InGen roads were barely visible, swallowed by years of jungle growth. Vines crept over what was once a fortress of science. "Looks peaceful," Fredrick muttered beside him, snapping a photo on an old digital tablet. "Like nature forgot it ever hated us." David didn't smile. Nature never forgets. In the back of the chopper, 8 armed mercenaries adjusted gear. Richard sat across from them, calm, confident, tapping a silver case on his knee, the kind executives carry when they want to look important. "We find the files, take a few samples, and get out before dark," Richard said. "Simple retrieval." Fredrick whispered, "Nothing about this place is simple." As they landed, the roar of the rotor faded into jungle silence, broken only by the buzz of insects and a distant, low moaning sound. David turned his head slowly. In the valley below, a massive shape moved through trees. A triceratops, tail swaying, snorted dust into the air. Fredrick raised his camera. Then, a thunderous roar. The trees behind the triceratops exploded open. Tyrannosaurus Rex. She hit the trike like a freight train. Horns snapped, dust flew, birds scattered. The trike fought back, rearing and goring with its remaining horn, but the T-Rex overpowered it, biting deep and pushing the dinosaur to the forest floor. The battle was short. The silence afterward was longer. Fredrick lowered his camera, mouth open. "Still think it's simple?" David asked. Chapter 2: Into the Shadows. The trail through the jungle was overgrown and wet, the old InGen path barely visible beneath thick roots and clinging moss. Every step made a squish or a crack or a snap. David led the group with his machete, carving a path beneath hanging vines and broad-leafed ferns. Above, pteranodons wheeled across the hazy sky, gliding over high cliffs. Their cries echoed like distant laughter, not welcoming, but watchful. Fredrick was behind him, holding a scanner and camera like lifelines. He paused now and then to point out strange plants or flickers of movement. "You know," Fredrick muttered, "you'd think with all these years abandoned, the jungle would have taken everything back." David didn't slow down. "It has. It's just letting us pass." Behind them, Richard barked orders to the mercs, complaining about mud, bugs, and the humidity. He wiped sweat from his brow and waved a drone into the air. "This place is a time capsule," he said, watching the drone disappear into the canopy. "We crack it open, take what we need, and leave the bones behind." One of the mercenaries muttered under his breath, "Hope the bones don't bite back." They stopped by an old InGen cargo station, overtaken by vines and trees. Metal signs were rusted and unreadable. The fences had long since fallen. Suddenly, screech! Everyone froze. It came again, a loud, shrill squeal of surprise. From the undergrowth, a small flock of Compsognathus burst out, chirping and clicking as they darted around the team's boots. Fredrick yelped and hopped backward. "They're just compies," David said, steadying him. "Scavengers, not dangerous." But then his eyes caught something else. A large claw mark, deep, fresh, etched across a fallen InGen supply crate. 4 razor-thin grooves. Fredrick noticed too. "That's not compy work." David knelt. The mark was almost the length of his forearm. He looked down the path, branches broken, footprints sunken into the mud. 3-toed, bird-like, too big for a compy, too wide for a wild raptor. "These tracks," he whispered, "they're recent." Fredrick checked the scanner. Thermal hit, just over that ridge. David stood up, gripped his machete tighter, and said quietly, "We're not the only ones watching." Back on a nearby ridge, hidden beneath leaves, 2 pairs of eyes glinted in the shade. Ghost, pale striped and silent, flicked her tongue toward the air. Fang, scarred and darker, crouched beside her. His eyes locked onto the team below. He gave a low, deep-throated growl. They did not strike. Not yet. This was the first test. Chapter 3: Ghosts in the Trees. The jungle slept under the weight of dusk. The sky turned deep orange, then dusky purple. Shadows stretched long and low across the forest floor. Birds chirped their final calls before falling silent. Even the pteranodons above had disappeared into the cliffs for the night. The team had made camp beside the ruins of a collapsed InGen watchtower. A few broken walls still stood, overgrown with moss and half swallowed by creeping vines. Solar lanterns flickered dimly around the perimeter. David sat near the fire, sharpening his machete out of habit, not need. Fredrick sat across from him, typing into a pad, surrounded by scanned maps and flickering old data drives. The mercenaries had split up, 4 patrolling the camp's edge, 4 resting near their tents. Richard, as always, stayed separate, leaning over his silver case and muttering to himself. Fredrick broke the silence. Hear of something called Project Raptor? David looked up sharply. Where'd you hear that? Old InGen network, fractured files, just pieces, mentions of 2 specimens, one called 09G and another 10F. No names, just codes. David's eyes narrowed. Classified black site research, unauthorized breeding. My team saw the reports when the island was abandoned, said they were too dangerous to move. Fredrick swallowed. You think they're still here? David didn't answer, but his hand tightened on the machete. Later that night, the forest was quiet. Too quiet. The usual sounds of frogs, insects, and rustling leaves had fallen into a heavy stillness. The only movement came from the flickering shadows cast by the firelight. A chirp came from the tree line. Then another, soft, almost like bird call. One mercenary stepped toward the sound, flashlight scanning the trees. Probably just a compy, he muttered, swinging beam left, then right. Nothing. Then a blur. Wham! Something heavy slammed into him from the side, dragging him into the darkness before he could scream. The others turned toward the noise, guns raised. Where'd he go? No visual. Crash! Another blur leapt from the trees. This one hit a second mercenary square in the chest, knocking him flat and unconscious. Something hissed, low, intelligent, hungry, then vanished again into the undergrowth. David jumped up, weapon ready. Lights, eyes out. Flashlights clicked on. Shadows scattered. Then, silence. Then, 2 glowing eyes. At the far edge of the firelight stood Ghost. She was nearly 6 feet tall, with sleek, pale-striped skin and a long snout. Her claws curled delicately as she stepped forward, tongue flicking the air. She didn't snarl. She didn't charge. She watched. A few feet behind her, Fang emerged, darker, bulkier, scars covering one side of his face. He growled low, protective. His eyes never left Richard. Richard, frozen, dropped the silver case. It clattered to the ground. Ghost turned to look at it, then turned to look at him. Then, without a sound, she backed away. Fang followed, and the jungle swallowed them whole. Silence returned, unnerving, heavy. 2 mercs gone. No blood, no cries, no chase. Fredrick stepped beside David, voice shaking. What were those? David exhaled slowly. Ghost and Fang, he said. Project Raptor. Fredrick stared at the dark tree line, eyes wide. They're not killing to eat, he whispered. They're choosing. David didn't respond, but in his mind something cold took root. This island isn't abandoned. It's occupied. Chapter 4, River of Teeth. The jungle opened up into a wide clearing where water shimmered in the moonlight. The old InGen canal system cut across the island like a scar, half choked with mud and vines but still flowing. A metal catwalk, rusted and crooked, stretched across it. David motioned for silence. Water crossing, he whispered. We take it slow. Fredrick stepped lightly behind him, flashlight aimed downward. Beneath the catwalk, the water was murky and still, but something about it felt off. The surface barely rippled. The group stepped cautiously across. Leaves rustled above, frogs chirped from the reeds, then a splash, too big for a frog. David paused. He raised a hand. Did something fall in? Fredrick asked quietly. No, David whispered. Something's already in. Beneath the surface, in the shadows of the canal, eyes opened, narrow, slitted. A long snout lined with jagged teeth broke the surface soundlessly. Baryonyx. It was long and crocodilian, with a sail-like ridge down its spine and mottled green and brown skin that shimmered like swamp water. It moved like it was part of the river, smooth, silent, patient, and hungry. Back on the catwalk, one mercenary trailed behind. His radio crackled with static. Last one across, he muttered. Nothing here. He turned. Something exploded from the water. The baryonyx roared. Jaws opened wide, grabbing the merc mid-stride and dragging him down into the canal with a sickening splash. Water churned red. Then stillness. Back! Back off the walkway! David yelled. The remaining merc scrambled. Fredrick slipped, but David caught his arm and pulled him across to safety. On the far bank, the team regrouped, panting. One soldier was gone. No trace. No bubbles. What was that? Fredrick gasped. David's voice was grim. It's called a baryonyx. It hunts in rivers. Used to feed on fish. He looked at the canal. Now it's moved up the food chain. From the reeds, a long shape slid away, silent and unseen. But it wasn't finished. Not yet. Chapter 4.5 The Hunting Swamp. The swamp was thick with mist and buzzing heat. Water pooled between patches of fern-covered ground, and towering trees loomed overhead like ancient sentinels. Everything felt damp, heavy, and alert. A herd of gallimimus darted through the open lowlands, 10 of them, long-legged and nimble. Their beaks clicked softly as they chirped among themselves, leaping over fallen logs and weaving between tree trunks. They were golden brown with lighter stripes across their backs, moving like a wave of featherless speed and instinct. They didn't see the hunter. Beneath the murky water, hidden just beyond a reed wall, the baryonyx lay still, except for its nostrils, barely above the surface. Its yellow eyes locked onto the herd. A low rumble vibrated in its throat. Its tail swished once. One gallimimus, smaller than the rest, paused for a drink at a muddy puddle. It chirped twice and dipped its narrow beak into the water. The swamp answered. Crash! The baryonyx lunged from the reeds like a crocodile from a nightmare. It snapped its jaws around the smaller gallimimus and threw it sideways into a tree, breaking branches and bone in the same instant. The rest of the herd shrieked and bolted, feet slamming into the wet earth. The baryonyx stood over its kill. Steam rose from its flared nostrils. It sniffed the air, then growled, but didn't feed. Something else had caught its attention. It turned its snout toward a broken ventilation shaft nearby, half covered by moss and vines. A strange scent drifted from within. Old air, metal, warm blood. Chapter 5 Echoes of the Past. The tunnel door groaned as it opened, metal scraping against rust. The stale air inside hit David like a forgotten memory, thick with mildew, oil, and something else. Something old. The survivors descended into what once was a secure InGen research outpost, now left to rot beneath the jungle floor. Flickering wall lights bathed the halls in weak yellow. Vines slithered in through cracks in the walls, reaching like fingers. Broken glass crunched under boots. A long hallway stretched before them, its walls still marked with faded logos. InGen, Genetic Division 3-Ec. Fredrick shined his flashlight along the walls. These labs were black sites, completely off-grid. They weren't supposed to exist. David didn't respond. He walked slowly, staring at the claw marks on the doors. 4 deep gashes, like the ones near camp. 2 wide to be wild raptors. 2 deliberate. The terminal. Fredrick powered up an old server station. It flickered, then buzzed to life with ancient static and fragmented files. File 09G hostile observation subject displays problem-solving behavior. Test chamber breach occurred within 22 hours of isolation. No signs of regression. Subject now avoids all other raptors and responds only to 10F. Another file loaded. Project Raptor Objective. Design Commandable Predator. Targets: military, crowd control, asset interception. Subjects bred for advanced cognition, hierarchical response, and direct human cue recognition. Fredrick leaned back. They weren't just making raptors smarter. They were trying to make them loyal weapons. David narrowed his eyes. And when it failed, they buried it. Suddenly, skreek! A faint metal dragging sound echoed down the tunnel. The group froze. Fredrick turned. What was that? David raised his hand. Movement up ahead. They crept forward until the corridor widened into a broken genetics lab. Tables were overturned, shattered tanks lined the walls. A mural of the original Velociraptor pen from Site B was half torn behind them. And then in the middle of the room, bones. Raptor bones. 3 skeletons, dried and hollow, lay scattered. Skull fractures. Torn ligaments. Fredrick knelt. These weren't wild raptors. David nodded. No, these were part of the same program. He turned and saw something carved into the steel wall, scratched in claw marks. No pack. No masters. No kings. David exhaled. They killed their own. Fredrick stood slowly. They don't just hate people, they hate control. Suddenly, the floor vibrated beneath them, just faintly. Thud! A low splash. From the tunnel behind them, something was coming. David raised his machete. Move. Now. Chapter 6. No Kings But Us. The morning mist lingered like breath across the valley, curling through thick tree trunks and glowing softly in the early light. Birds called, insects buzzed, and something larger moved through the brush with deadly grace. A small herd of Parasaurolophus fed near a riverbank. Tall, duck-billed herbivores with long curved crests painted in olive green with blue streaks along their flanks. They walked slowly, calmly, chewing leaves from ferns and trees. But they weren't alone. 3 velociraptors watched from the ridge, a wild pack. They moved like shadows in the tall grass, lean, striped, and restless. These weren't like Ghost or Fang. They were pack hunters, fast, brutal, but simple. Animals in instinct, not design. The lead raptor hissed, flicked its tail. The others fanned out in perfect formation, slipping between roots and low ferns. One parasaur lifted its head, ears flicking. Too late. With a shriek, the raptors pounced. One leapt onto the flank of a parasaur, digging claws into flesh. The startled dinosaur bellowed and stumbled, crashing into the trees. A second raptor lunged at the throat, and within seconds the parasaur was brought down. The others fled, blood mixed with morning dew. The 3 raptors circled their prize, hissing and chirping. But one paused. Its nostrils flared. It smelled something else, something unnatural. On the ridge above, 2 shapes appeared, silent, still, watching. Ghost stood first. Her pale skin was damp with morning mist, tail twitching slowly. Her forked tongue flicked the air. Beside her, Fang stepped forward, shoulders tense, scarred eye gleaming in the light. They saw the pack, they saw the kill, and they moved. The wild raptors froze. The first barely had time to turn before Fang struck. His full weight slammed into it, jaws clamping down on its neck. A crack, quick and final. Ghost leapt from above, slashing across another's side. It shrieked, flailing, but she twisted midair and landed behind it, raking her claws deep into its spine. The third raptor backed away, chirping, confused. Fang stared it down. Ghost circled it slowly. It hissed, then bowed its head, a last, desperate attempt at submission. Ghost responded with a low, almost mournful growl. Then she lunged. Silence returned to the forest. The parasaur corpse remained untouched. Ghost stepped over the kill, inspecting it. Then, in a rare motion, she looked at Fang and turned away. They didn't kill to eat. They killed to remind the world. There are no kings, only them. Chapter 7. Underworld. The tunnel system wound beneath the surface like the bones of the island itself, narrow, cold, and echoing with old ghosts. The survivors descended deeper, following dim lights and old engine maintenance maps. Dust floated like ash through the air. The walls, once white, were now cracked and green with moss. Above them, the jungle raged with life. Down here, only silence. David led the way with a flashlight in one hand and machete in the other. Behind him came Fredrick, still shaken but determined. 3 mercenaries followed, the rest now lost to the island. Fredrick whispered, "These tunnels weren't on any of the surface maps." "They're older," David replied. "Emergency escape routes, and something else." He stopped. A strange claw mark scraped across a sealed blast door. Not raptor, not dilophosaur, something wider. A guttural, wet echoed from deeper in the tunnel. They weren't alone. Shadows and slaughter. The group entered an old cargo chamber, metal crates stacked like tombstones. Pipes hissed softly above. Water trickled along the floor, puddling at their boots. Suddenly, a shape lunged from the shadows. The baryonyx, soaked, dripping, eyes glowing yellow. It tore into the first mercenary, slamming him against the crate wall and sinking teeth into his side. The man screamed, short, sharp, and then was dragged into the darkness. The group opened fire. Bullets sparked off pipes and crates. Fredrick shouted, "Run!" They sprinted through a lower corridor. The baryonyx gave chase, claws dragging across the metal floor with a sound like nails on a coffin lid. Another mercenary fell behind. The creature lunged again, jaw widening. Crunch! Gone. David and Fredrick rounded a corner and burst into a wider control room. They slammed the door shut behind them. Only one mercenary remained, panting, shaking, holding his rifle with white knuckles. Drips echoed in the silence. Fredrick collapsed against the console. "We need another way out." David looked up at the flickering emergency lights. "There is one," he said. "South shaft, but it's collapsed." Footsteps or claws? The merc stepped back. It's coming. We've got to move. Fredrick glanced at a nearby ventilation shaft. There, that leads to the outer stair access. They didn't wait. As they climbed into the shaft, Fredrick turned back, just in time to see the baryonyx burst into the room. It didn't chase. It stared at him, and then slowly retreated into the dark. Not done. Just patient. Chapter 8, Predator's End. Richard Ranches whipped across his face. Roots caught his boots. His breath came ragged, sharp in his throat. Sweat poured down his neck as he shoved through the undergrowth with the stolen data case clutched tightly in both hands. Behind him, gunfire echoed, then silence. He didn't look back, didn't need to. He knew they were gone. The jungle tightens. The deeper he ran, the quieter the jungle became. Not from peace, but from tension. The trees grew taller. Shadows stretched longer. The call of birds faded, replaced by something else. A wet rustle, a hiss, footsteps in the leaves. He stumbled onto an old InGen service trail, barely visible beneath layers of rotting debris. Half a map sign still stood. Zone 4, Perimeter Research Ring. He stopped to catch his breath, then placing the silver case on a fallen log. That was when he noticed the blood on his sleeve, not his own. And just as he turned, a low hiss. From the tree line, two shapes emerged, heads low, neck frills twitching. Dilophosaurs. They were sleek and dark, with vivid green frills lined in red. Their yellow eyes were wide, unblinking. One clicked its jaws, the other's frill flared open like a demon's crown. Richard backed away slowly. No. Splat! Venom sprayed across a tree behind him. He ducked just in time. He turned to run. The first Dilo leapt at him, slashing with claws, and clipped his shoulder. Richard screamed, tumbling into the mud. The other Dilo lunged in, biting into his thigh before he kicked it away, scrambled to his feet, and bolted through the trees, bleeding, limping. He burst into a clearing, heart pounding. Then the jungle went still again. Too still. From the far side of the clearing, Ghost stepped out. She was slow, deliberate. Her pale stripes glowed in the filtered moonlight. Her eyes, cold, intelligent, didn't blink. Beside her, Fang emerged low to the ground, growling softly. His jaw twitched. Scars shone silver in the dusk. Richard fell backwards, scrambling, the case slipping from his grasp. No! I brought your files! I can control you! Ghost stepped forward. The two Dilophosaurs trailing behind crept to the edge of the clearing, but froze when they saw her. They hissed nervously. Fang turned to them and roared. In a flash, he pounced. Claws met frills. The first Delo shrieked as Fang slammed it into a tree, bones snapping like branches. The second turned to flee, but Ghost caught it mid-run, jaws snapping down on its neck. Crack! Silence! The clearing became a grave. Richard crawled to the data case, opened it, shaking, hands bloody. Please, I just want to leave. Fang stepped closer. Last Ghost circled him. They didn't roar. They didn't rush. This wasn't a hunt. It was a judgment. Richard stood, staggering. I made you? Ghost tilted her head. Fang roared, and they attacked. The forest birds flew skyward in a screeching burst. Far in the distance, the island trembled with a deep bellowing roar. The Tyrannosaurus Rex was awake again. Ghost paused, blood dripping from her claws. Her head turned toward the sound. She growled low. Fang stepped back beside her. The kingdom had another king, and she didn't like it. The two raptors vanished into the jungle, leaving only the broken case and the remains of a man who thought he could rule. Escape. Morning broke slowly over Isla Sorna. The sky turned soft gold as mist clung to the treetops, casting long shadows across a jungle that had fed well during the night. The few survivors stood at the edge of an overgrown InGen pier, looking out at the vast gray ocean. David, bruised and cut, scanned the tree line, machete still in hand. Fredrick stood beside him, quietly holding a tracker. Only one mercenary remained. He didn't speak much anymore. The old boat they had come in had taken damage, but it still floated. The backup fuel cells were just enough for a slow return, if they could get aboard. The earth trembles. A low thud rolled through the trees. Then another. Then another. Birds exploded from the canopy as the Tyrannosaurus Rex stepped into view, her massive head bobbing above the palms. Her golden brown hide gleamed in the light, scarred from battles old and new. She roared once, a thunderous, echoing blast of dominance. And the jungle answered. From the side, the ground shook. A Gallimimus stampede burst from the trees, dozens of striped bodies darting wildly across the beach, kicking sand and leaves into the air. The survivors scattered for cover. David dove into a broken supply shed. Fredrick was nearly trampled before the mercenary yanked him aside. The stampede broke past them and fled down the coast, away from the wrecks. David emerged, eyes wide. Now! That's our chance! They sprinted down the dock as the T-Rex approached, sniffing at the remains of the stampede. The pier creaked and groaned under their feet. Fredrick fumbled with the controls. Just a few more seconds. From the ridge above, a flicker of movement. Ghost. Fang. They stood watching, barely visible behind the leaves. They didn't move. They didn't follow, just watched. Their message was clear. Leave. Stay gone. The island is ours. The engine sputtered to life. The boat pulled from the dock, slow but steady. David watched the jungle fade behind them as the island finally fell quiet again. Fredrick turned. Do you think they'll ever come back for us? David didn't answer right away. He looked toward the tree line where he'd seen the raptors vanish, where the T-Rex now roared into the wind, claiming her territory again. Then he said softly, No, this place doesn't need people anymore. And as the boat vanished into the morning fog, the island remained. Wild, unforgiving, free. Epilogue. The kingdom endures high on a cliff overlooking the coast. Ghost and Fang stood side by side. In the distance, a brachiosaurus moved slowly through the valley, accompanied by an apatosaurus, their long necks swaying with the wind. Pteranodons wheeled above, crying out like ancient spirits. Far below, a group of Compsognathus scattered across the rocks. Life had returned, but it would not be tamed.